What is your area of expertise?
So language and literacy interventions for diverse populations, children from vulnerable populations, whether they have disabilities, at risk, bilingual, typically developing kids. Everybody needs academic language interventions.
Tell me about your study. What were you and your colleagues looking at?
We were actually developing an intervention to do a bilingual version of academic language instruction for young kids. And the idea was to develop this intervention in partnership with the Head Start teachers to make sure that it had good contextual fit for their classrooms and that it met the needs of the children that we were targeting, which were primarily Spanish-speaking families from Mexican descent, right? And so we created the intervention, and then in 2015 we conducted this study, and it was really to see the effects of that intervention on children's language outcomes in both Spanish and English.
What is the need that you guys are trying to address with this intervention?
There is a huge need actually for bilingual interventions, and we have a huge need for workforce or preschool teachers and families to be able to do bilingual interventions. The need is really about making sure these children are not left behind and that they're kindergarten ready. So oftentimes our children who have a home language other than English, their first exposure to English is when they hit preschool. And to develop a new language, you actually need a lot of instruction, you need a lot of time, and you need a lot of exposure. And oftentimes they don't get it enough. They don't get it fast enough for long enough, and the quality of that instruction is not as good as it could be. And so by doing this intervention, we could increase the pace at which children are acquiring English, which is the language of instruction in their schools, and at the same time be able to preserve children's home language, which was really important because often in schools we say, okay, great, you speak that other language at home, it doesn't matter here. And that's a really bad message to be sending because our young kids actually have a lot of language skills even when they come to school, even if it's not English. And so we really needed to take advantage of what they already had and treat it like assets and strengths and be able to facilitate the transfer from their home language to their language of instruction, which in this case is English.
Walk me through the intervention. What did you have the teachers do? What did the kids do?
The intervention is actually a multi-tiered dual language intervention. And what that means is that it works, and we have lessons for delivery at the large group level, so for the whole class. But that component is in English only because the whole class doesn't speak Spanish, right? So that's an English only delivery, and the teacher would deliver it twice a week in a large group format, English only. And then the children who speak Spanish as their home language would get a small group intervention, and it alternates between Spanish and then English, Spanish and English. So 4 days a week they would get a small group intervention that lasts about 15 minutes. And there's intentional overlap between the Spanish and English lessons so that we can kind of build a bridge between the two languages. And a teacher or a teaching assistant in the classroom can deliver that in the whole group or the small group. Whoever's the Spanish speaker can, deliver the Spanish component of it. The lessons themselves are made up of two primary targets. One is oral storytelling, and the second one is vocabulary, and not just like concept words or basic words, but complex vocabulary we would call academic. And these are words that are less common in children's repertoires, but certainly are found in books and the kind of vocabulary that teachers and adults would use in school contexts, kind of like school vocabulary, right? And so we need to, our goal was to expose these children and to teach these words very explicitly so they have the language they need to be able to understand what's going on in class, right? So it's kind of like the language and vocabulary needed to keep learning. And so this, from a conceptual framework, we build their first language by doing storytelling and academic vocabulary and boost up their first language. And then we make a quick transfer over to English, right? Because there's some shared features between them, we kind of take advantage of it and hasten the acquisition of language because we work on their hasten the acquisition of English because we work on their home language first. So in the intervention itself, there's a series of activities. We start with a teacher modeling the story. We use brightly colored pictures, but not too complex, not too complicated or overwhelming stimuli. They're kind of simple drawings, and they're really intriguing to children. And the stories are made up of really relevant themes. They're about what kids experience, and that's important because these children may not have background knowledge to understand something that they've never been exposed to, but they all have experience with things like misplacing something or getting hurt or wanting to play with a toy that someone else has. And so we create our stories around these, what we call realistic themes or personally relevant themes, so that kids can already relate to them. So in the activities, we start by telling a story, showing some pictures, and then we teach the parts of the story. So main parts of the story are character, problem, feeling, action, and ending. We teach the names of those parts. We also teach gestures that go along with them so they can remember those things. So while they're listening to stories, they may go, oh, that's the character. Oh, that's the problem, feeling, action, ending. So it helps in kind of like a multiple modality kind of learning. And then once they've heard the story a few times and they've practiced with their gestures and been introduced to the words, then it's their turn to tell the story. So then the children get to retell that story, and the teacher just kind of facilitates, uses some questions and some modeling to help them say the sentences themselves. And in the whole time, they're working on using those complex vocabulary words like rough and narrow and collect, words that they wouldn't normally use. So, and then the last piece about the intervention is that there is a family engagement component. So all of the lessons that they would get at school, whether English or Spanish, there's just a one-page kind of activity that goes home with the families, and they can now talk about the words. They can have the child look at the pictures and retell it, but that component is 100% in Spanish. And that's because at school, English is the primary language. And so Spanish is only getting used for 15 minutes twice a week. The Spanish component at home helps to boost their Spanish, and it sends the message to families that you can help your kids with their homework in your